you kind of lose sense of what you're doing when you're just chasing money. And it makes them feel like they're progressing, but they're not really feeling fulfilled spiritually, financially, emotionally, because just running at a pace that's not their pace.
It's a great reminder that people say, oh, I could never do that. Well, yeah, you can. If we can do it, you can do it.
I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out.
Exactly. Jason Yarusi is a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and host of the Multifamily Live podcast. Beyond business success, Jason teaches how to align action, discipline, and higher consciousness and transform not only our finances, but our entire lives. Join me as Jason reveals how spiritual growth and practical strategy work hand in hand to help us live with purpose, abundance, and joy. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Do you see money as spiritual energy? And if so, how can we shift our vibration to attract more of it?
I think it really relates to time, right? Because there's a certain point where I was doing a lot of jobs or having businesses that were really transactional, right? And I was seeing it as that you kind of lose sense of what you're doing when you're just chasing money. And so I was in the restaurant world, the bar world, and the construction world, and those businesses where, if there was 25 hours in a day, right? If you're working for tips or you're out there having to do a service job, sometimes you lose sight of really what the ultimate goal is. And as I started to get into a family and have young kids, right? The more important part is, how to make the most of my time while still having value. Right. And then you start looking at what could I do in the world that could be valuable and feel like I'm making progress. Right. And feel like, I'm being useful and not just doing something to have activity. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck in a rhythm where they're doing a lot of active things and it makes them feel like they're progressing, but they're not really feeling fulfilled, right? Spiritually, financially, emotionally, because they're just running at a pace that's not their pace.
So is it possible for somebody to attract money from an energetic standpoint? Is there a formula that involves, obviously you got to take action, but is there a formula that you suggest that includes kind of like the mind, body, physical kind of a thing to help people, especially when they're in a rut financially and they're panicked and they're like, oh my God, how am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to feed my kids and all of that?
Panic is real and it's hard to overcome because many times you just feel like you're out of control, right? And I remember many points in my life just feeling out of control. And usually you can't calm the noise if you just take it all on at the same time, right? So many times if you're, in a fight with your spouse, you're having trouble at your job, you're not happy with what you're doing, you feel out of shape, right? You're trying to take on everything at once and you treat everything as if you're in a car and you have the gas pedal all the way down and you're at RPM 8,000, right? And what you have to do that's very simple is that you look at them as, 5-second problems and 5-year problems, right? And I say the 5-second problem is where it's just something that you need to get done. Oh, I need to, pick up Advil, right? And it's like, that's not a big deal, but you may seem like it's this 5-year problem where I have to decide today if I take this contract on this job because this could be really valuable for the company or could hurt the company, right? That's the thing where you have to put all of your energy in, but you treat all these problems the same and then you feel overwhelming. And where I see the difficulty is that when you take everything on the same level, they're not all the same, right? You have to really put things in buckets and you have to put them down on paper. You can find that if you take everything out of your head and you put it down on paper, what you do is that's the first step to solving the problems. Because your part, especially, you're an inventor, an entrepreneur, you've done all these things with businesses. When you stop looking at everything as a problem, you look at yourself as a person to provide solutions, what happens? You start finding solutions. But if you're constantly looking at everything as a problem, well, then you just find more problems. And when you start to turn that around, you start to find that the things that are really difficult today, years ago, they would have crippled you, right? But the things that were difficult to you 5 years ago, they're like speed bumps. You don't even remember them. And you start to grow and persevere and start to find that energy and start to find that other thing in your mind, right? Because it's like you have like what is it, 65 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and you repeat somewhere in the context of like 45 to 80,000 of those thoughts. And so if you're just constantly putting negative in your mind, you're waking up the next day with that overall course of negativity. And so you have to be conscious, to be self-aware about how you're speaking, how you're thinking, so you can turn around and start to change your words, right? You ever walk into, I don't know, you go get gas somewhere and you walk in and you grab a drink, right? And you go up to the counter and you go, how are you? And the person goes, well, at least I'm not dead, right? It's like, well, like, it's like, okay, but like, if you think
You're
in that
having a bad
mindset,
day.
yeah, but like if that's like their ultimate goal, and like there's so many people out there, like that's how they go through it. Like, like worst case scenario, I'm not dead, right? Like that's how good my day is. But when you catch yourself doing that, you can start to be conscious of it. Like instead of I can't do it, it's not for me, I'm not smart enough, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too out of shape, right? Then you start saying, well, I haven't done it yet. And you start putting in possibility back into your voice, into your mind. And lo and behold, you don't think it makes a big difference, but when you start having that, you start seeing where the energy is, both in yourself and in other people. And you start putting yourself in a position where you don't want to be around other people that are constantly looking down, constantly apart. You want to be around people that are looking forward. And you want to start helping people that are also looking forward. And it brings you to this new level where you get out of your own way. And most of the time, there's not other people stopping us. And usually we think, oh, well, my boss won't give me a raise, or, I didn't get selected for this thing. But really in this part, you're in the right spot of where you are. And when you stop being in your own way, you start to see all these possibilities that exist just by really putting your eyes and opening your eyes for the first time.
I teach that thoughts don't have a meaning until we give them a meaning. All thoughts are neutral.
Sure. Yeah.
And every thought has a frequency, has a vibration. Every spirit that's attached to a body, every spirit that's in heaven, we all have frequencies, our spirits do, and we can connect with them. And so thoughts, I say, when you're feeling bad, you're on the low frequency channels. You're on the I feel crappy channels, and you can't get inspired because your intuition isn't receiving signals from your guides and God and heaven and all those guys, because they're on the feel good channels. It's like tuning into, a sports channel on Fox Sports, let's say, versus some kind of sad channel it's just playing sad movies or something. It's being broadcast, but you're not receiving it. So I agree with you. And the whole premise too, Jason, I love your take on this of our thoughts create our reality. And when you're thinking Eeyore type thoughts, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so tired, whatever. I call those Eeyore thoughts, because Eeyore is always
Yes.
complaining about something in Winnie the Pooh. That's what you're going to attract more of, because that's the signal you're sending out. And versus
It's the
when
weather
you,
vane, right? Have you been, I know so many people that have based their whole day based on what the weather is like when you wake up. And could you imagine, like, it's rainy today, and which it rains like 30% of the year, but your day is thrown off by the weather, or it's cold out in part. And you can't be so reactionary, because if you are, you're constantly in a world of stress, and you're in a world of feeling out of control, right? There's like the Stoic philosophies, right? It can control what you do and what you think about or what you say versus on what happens to you, right? And when we're in this piece where you're just constantly out of control based on things that are outside of your control, well, then it's double as hard to control what's in your control.
that's right. Exactly. And the other thing that's interesting about all of this too is that there's so many easy ways, and I want to do a deep dive with you a little bit later in our discussion about some of your suggested easy ways for people to turn the tide in their own lives. But one easy way that I do if I'm feeling blue is I put on some kind of fun music. I
Yeah.
grew up in the disco era. You can't listen to disco music and be in a bad mood. It's not possible. Versus you live in Nashville, the whiny old time country music stations where they're whining about mama, the truck, and the dog. You listen to that. I don't understand why anybody listens to that, because it would just put me in a depressed mood. So I'm like, listening to Staying Alive or something. And music will immediately get me into a better mood. Do you find that too? Do you ever use music to help you feel better?
I see it a lot now having young kids again, because you start to have certain, we'll say, seasons in your life where you start to use different things that speak to you for what you do, right? But now, they're into music, they're into different things. My daughter's into dance, my son's finding his form of what he likes from music, and you see how their energy changes, right? And sometimes it's just as obvious to see how others react within yourself, right? And I've been paying attention to that a lot lately, because you can just see how energy changes based on just certain environments, right? And
So let it go, let
yeah,
it go for
100%. Yeah.
Frozen. I'm sure you probably dream that. You
Yeah.
hear that all
It's
the
the
time.
same thing. You walk into, I don't know, an event or a meeting, right? And everybody's sitting there hushed, their shoulders are down, they're talking, right? You feel the energy of the room. Or if you come in there, everybody's vibrant, everybody's talking, right? Like you walk in a different light, right? And you many times feel the energy in the room, and it brings you to that energy, and it can both be positive or negative. And then if it's negative, it's on your side to say, okay, do I want to accept this, right? Do I want to accept this negative energy, or do I want to be like, or be like, it's irrelevant, I'm going to be my own energy? And that's the hardest thing to break. And you'll see this in generations, even in family contexts, where you'll almost feel like you have to match like the prior energy. Like, oh, dad and mom always had it rough, so I guess I have to have it rough, and then I have to partake this to my kids, and they have to have it rough because everybody's had it rough. So then we have to continue to have it rough because that's just how it is. It's just rough until you decide it's not, and then you change it and you say, you know what, that's there's a lesson there, and I'm sorry they had, but it only stops with me, or it keeps going with me.
Well, and I'll take that a step further, because what I've heard from Spirit about a bazillion times is we all decide where we're born, when we're born, to whom we're born, and the circumstances into which we're born, Jason. So if somebody's born into a family where, let's say, they're struggling for whatever reason, financially or however, that gives them the impetus many times to have their life be on a trajectory where they can create what they want, because they know what they don't want. And if we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we want. Otherwise, if everything's just great, you don't really have much of an incentive, to create new things. And that's why we're all here. Speaking of which, tell us, did you have a moment when you chose intuition over logic and it changed things for you? I want to hear about that, first of all. And secondly, I want to hear about, did you grow up in a family of entrepreneurs and positive thinking parents and siblings and extended family? I want to hear both of those stories.
So my dad, he's retired now, just retired, but he had a small construction business, and he grew up in a generation, right? So he was in a family setting where his mother died, and dad got remarried, and the wife really wasn't a fan of my dad, so they literally put him in Vietnam. Like, he went, this day he was eligible, he went to Vietnam, and so he came back through all that. It was a very rough setting for him, right? And a lot of that carried on for years, and him and my mom have been together forever, right? Lo and behold, it was great, right? But there was always that part. My dad constantly felt like he had to go out there to prove something, so he was just constantly at work. And this was the time, no cell phones and stuff. My dad would be at construction, so I would rarely see him. For most of my childhood, just he was there but not there, right? And I think he was battling his own demons, right? And we've had, over the last probably 10 years, a whole transformation to our relationship, which has been a lot of fun. But there was many years where I think of myself, he having kids now, right? There was, I'm dealing with things in my own life, right? How he was having to deal at my age with those points, and I'm at that age, right? And it's helpful to look at that, to hopefully learn from that, right? But they were facing that same part. And then having a small business, and construction businesses in New Jersey, they many years they struggled, right? And many years that it was difficult, and many years that they were. My dad was super good at work, and many times with businesses, and especially small businesses, there's usually two sides. Either you're really good at the business side, but you're horrible at the work, or you're really good at the work and you're horrible at the business. And it wasn't that my dad was horrible at the business, but he was so good at the work that he wouldn't focus on the business. And that can be difficult to do. And we eventually, after years of I went and worked in New York City in bars and restaurants and did that. Hurricane Sandy happened on the East Coast, and lo and behold, his business was focused on really fixing and lifting moving buildings. It was a very specialized business, and he was like, just to talk about how skilled and how amazing he was, and just his ability to solve these massive problems. Well, that business would do like 8 or 10 projects a year, and then lo and behold, this hurricane happens, and he would get 1,000 phone calls a day. So my little brother and who was working with me in my projects in the city, and now my wife, my girlfriend, we moved to New Jersey and we helped Dad, really ramp up this business. And there was a learning curve there because it's such a specialized thing in construction that I might as well have been trying to learn Japanese. Like that's what it was in the beginning. But we were able to go from 10 projects a year to at the cusp. Back in 2012, 2013, we were doing 250 projects a year of these very
Wow.
high intensive projects. And so we
Goodness.
completely transformed that business. It was a ton of fun, but it was also there's a curve, right? Because when you have young and old, right? I've always done it this way, and then but I can see a different way, which potentially could be easier or less stressful or less strained. So we had Italian family trying to find our way together. And we made it work. We had a lot of challenge, a lot of growth, a lot of good, and a lot of lessons in there. And that was a good spot for me to, finally work with my dad, because I never wanted to go into that because I saw how difficult it was on them. And then when we got into that, it was also a good lesson because it was fun to help, Dad get to a level where it was just, it felt good, right? But it also served that I didn't want to be doing this thing. Like I'd worked in bars, right? It's like the bar world where like you serve a drink, you get a tip. Well, okay, if I serve 10 drinks, I get 10 tips. If I serve 100, right? And you keep repeating it. Well, now we're in this construction business where we go sell a job, we have to do a job, then we sell a job, then we have to do a job. It was just never ending wheel that just had no ending point. And that's why we started to explore the world of real estate. And so we just kept looking at that, is that I kept open to it, right? It was that open part where, for a lot of my years, I felt stuck until I said that I'm not stuck. I just need to keep trying things until I figure out what's my thing.
So was
And
that the catalyst that you thought, okay, logically, this construction business is going nuts. Intuitively, I don't really want to do this. I'm not being led to do this. I need to look for something else. And that's when you got into the real estate investing business.
we started looking for ways and avenues to just get back time, right? And so my first son was born, and so that was 2014, right? And so when we looked at that, it just couldn't be working 25 hours in the day. Like that's what we'd be doing if there was 25 hours. And it was like, okay, so what do we have to do to like get back where it wasn't the day running me? And I see that a lot in life. People's days run them, and then they repeat the same thing the next day, and the next day they say, why is nothing changing? Right? Well, I'm doing the same thing every day, but why is it not changing? It's because nothing's changing, right? You're in this part here where you're just doing the exact same thing and expecting something magically to happen that's different. So we started to explore different real estate things, and we started flipping. And what I found with flipping, it was basically construction again. I was just doing the same thing and just in a different role. I was just doing a transactional world in a different world. And we started doing things that were called wholesaling and Airbnb, and all those models followed that recipe of having to be very transactional, going meeting the realtors, meeting the contractors, going to Home Depot, working out. And it just needed me to be the linchpin. So there's no scalability there. There was no point because I was the middle, right? So if I wasn't in there, if I wasn't controlling the narrative, then there was no narrative. And when I discovered investment properties, really out of state investing, I learned how to formulate what I had done some to grow the restaurant world in New York City, is that I was able to put teams together that could help grow that while I could manifest the idea, right? And just the idea of the project and the investment process. And then I could put pieces together that I could allow the investment to take place and to carry through. And so we started to go from some small investments in Indianapolis to a larger apartment building. We ended up 2016, brought a 94 unit apartment building in Louisville, Kentucky. And that was the catalyst, because that just made all the sense. I was like, okay, this was something that I could put a team together. I could scale. I could really grow, because here I am. I'm not out there, meeting 94 tenants. I'm not out there on the ground collecting rent checks. I have a property manager. I have a whole system in place. I have a way we do this. And I made sure that the process really fit, right? Okay, cool. We did this for 8 or 9 months, and we started to explore more. And then, 8 or 9 months later, we brought another one, and, we've done 35 something projects now since that time.
So you were being led. You knew there was more to the equation. You knew there was a way to get out of this. I keep thinking of one of my best friends who's in heaven. She died 5 years ago, I guess. And she came from very humble background, a humble background in Mississippi, and was the first one in her family to go to college and to graduate. She was very smart. She went on a full ride, got an accounting degree, and was an auditor. And then she and her husband started their first company. And she told me that there were years where she said, I can think of months in a row where we had grits for dinner every night. We had cheese grits, we had butter grits, we had, whatever, bacon grits we had. But she said, I served grits because that's all we could afford. And they had 3 little kids. And about 5 years before she passed, she sold her company for $200 million.
That's amazing.
So when you hear stories like that, like what you're talking about, certainly I'm a wildcatter entrepreneur, started from nothing and made it happen too. I think it's a great reminder that people say, oh, I could never do that. Well, yeah, you can. If we can do it, you can do it. If you can feed your kids grits every night, because that's what you're needing to do in order to have the vision to do something that's going to better your family. Yeah,
I would say there's one line that comes to me every time I hear something like that, is that and it just is constantly happening, is that I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out.
exactly.
And if you just keep
Yeah,
that in your mind at all times, like everybody else doesn't know how to do it either, but if you could just say, okay, I don't know how to do it, and just give up, or you say, I'm going to figure it out. And when you add in that last layer, that I'm going to figure it out, I don't know if it's tomorrow, I don't know if it's Sunday, I don't know if it's a month from now, but at some part, I'm going to figure out the recipe to do it. I'm going to keep searching to it.
well, and what I've learned, and I'm in my mid-60s, I could be your mama. And I have learned, and I learned this in my 20s, because I started being an entrepreneur early, but I learned the people I need to show up and the circumstances I need to show up always show up right when I need them,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how stressful it is. And what I find is that when we just trust that, and you're in that zone now, I can feel it with you, you're in that zone. And I think it applies to everything. It's not just business, it's not just money, because what's your definition of true wealth?
And when you get locked into a dollar amount, and honestly, you'll never be happy, right? And so I've thought about this, but like wealth can come. You can look at it as money. We can also look at it as ideas, and you can also look at it how you pass this on, right? So my value in time, right? We say like, what would be ultimate success in the long run, right? Well, it comes down to what you're going to pass on with your kids, right? My kids are going to be in a point where they got to make decisions coming up. And I'm not going to be standing there over them to say that you should make this decision at the time. But hopefully I've prepared them in a way that when they come up and face challenges, right, the wealth has been served, that I've given them enough ability to just comprehend or just make good decisions or just make good choices going forward. And they can pass that on, right? Because that would be wealthy. Because if I just go and I spend all my time right now and I make a ton of money and I give nothing back and I don't help my kids at all, right? And then, I go and I pass on, I leave them money, right? And they're not prepared. So they go and they make horrible choices. They make all these things and they're hurtful to their family, right? What kind of wealth has really been created there?
Well, and I think to expand on that, wealth is spending time with your family. Wealth is health, your health. I mean, if you're sick or you got some big dreaded disease, doesn't matter how much money you have. It's not gonna be enjoyable. I
Yeah.
think there are
What is
lots
it?
of
The healthy man has a million wants and the sick man has just one, right?
yeah, and to your point about your kids, what's the saying? Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And why is that? Because, like what you just said, the parents aren't spending the time with the kids to develop that relationship. And I think you're a great example, Jason, of it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for people that have an MBA from Harvard. I didn't want an MBA. I didn't want it messing up my brain. I wanted to be a wildcatter entrepreneur. I wanted to think outside of the box instead of, well, you got to do this way, not that way. And no, thank you. Now, I have a bunch of MBAs that have worked for me over the years, but I I think when those ideas come into the head, and I want to hear your take on this, it's a matter of taking action on them, even if it's something that's minor. Because we all have ideas, but most of us don't act on them. What is it about the fear that holds us back?
So we set many times we set what's really valuable to us based on other people's what we perceive to be other people's perception of us, right? And so if I take action, right, and I've been telling my friends I was going to do this forever, and then I fail, I'm going to look stupid, right? And when we stop that and we really just put it back there, that taking action is the only way for me to learn, right? You can do and read all the books on, you could spend years being able to be like, oh, if I read all these books, I'll learn how to ride a bike, or you just go and get on a bike, right? There's two different ways, right? And many times we'll spend all this time like equate that to anything, right? I want to go start a business. So I'm going to read a million things about starting a business, right? But the first day you do something and you say, oh, that wasn't in the book. I guess I got to stop and go read more books, right? Instead of just saying, okay, let me just go do anything to start. And because usually when you do something, right, that piece of action usually creates three things, right? You do it and it's in complete wrong direction. You say, okay, well, I learned don't do that again. Okay, so don't do that again. Or you do take a step, right? And it's kind of the right way, kind of the wrong way. You're like, okay, so that was kind of the wrong way, but what was in the right? Okay, so let's just pivot this a little bit. Now I'm on the right way. Or you take another step, right? And that other step is right in the right direction. Now you say, oh, cool, let's take another step and learn. You just keep doing that. And if you do that, you always get three steps. But usually the fourth thing that people don't figure in is that, okay, those are three steps of taking action, but there's the other action of no action. And people choose, right? You've made a decision to take no action. Well, that's still a choice, right? That's still a choice that a million times that most people make because they want to have something set up for us. Because what you usually think is that if I start today, in a year I'll have this, right? And so you're so focused on, in a year I'll have this thriving business part, but you forget that there's all these steps in between, right? Your goals are like one day, one glimpse, one moment in time, but you spend all the time on the journey. And so you have to focus on the journey, not in the goal. And you get so locked in this goal that could be anybody else's goal. And it's really difficult today because we have social media, we have all these different things that are just pinging us, hitting us, so much information coming at us at all times that we get stuck in other people's goals and forget about our goal. And your goal doesn't have to be anyone else's goal, right? You have to be focused on what you're doing, learning from the experience because, we started flipping, then wholesaling, then Airbnb, then this part. But if I just said, oh, today I'm definitely going to do this, right? But I have to learn all about it. I would have never started. But I started doing. And the most important thing for doing is that when you do, it's just important to learn what you want to do to learn what you don't want to do. Because when you learn what you don't want to do, at least you got it off the plate. But if you say, well, I'm deciding between, I'm going to go and be a scientist, I'm going to go and, open a construction business, like you're in 9 different fields, you never try any of them, you never make a decision what you want to do. But if you go the first day and say, I'm going to be a scientist, oh, I don't like this at all in construction, or I don't want to be outside, right? Then eventually you're going to find what you want to do if you just keep trying things. And that's the piece of the puzzle is you have to explore, just like anything in life. You have to explore with what makes you happy, what makes you fulfilled. And it's going to adapt as you go forward. Like you said, like the value of having time now, I've said, we waste a lot of time. And there was years where I wasted a lot of time. But now I've set priorities. Like I coach my kids' sports teams. So it's fun to do that. So that certain times during the day, like at the end of the day, I have to go coach a sports. Like that's where I am. So that means when I get into the office, I have to prioritize what's important for the day. I can't go and then mess around for 4 hours and then all of a sudden, not have time to get what's important done because I'm not being valuable to the business, to the investors, right? So you have to, when you cut down on the things that really don't matter in your business, and then you set priorities that what are, I'm going to be at my kids' activities. I'm going to be present for these. I'm going to take them to these things. Well, I have to get done what's important for the business before that happens. Because that is something that I've set in stone that gets done.
Yeah, yeah, and the family is a priority always. Couple of points that were rattling around in my head when I was just listening to your last comment, Jason. The first one is, if we knew what the roadmap was for everything in life, life would be so boring. I mean, come on. If you were going on a roller coaster for the first time and you knew what was going to happen, well, that wouldn't be any fun. You want to have the experience. The other thing that's interesting is I have found that we think we know how things are going to unfold. And oftentimes we know what the end result is, but we don't know how we're going to get there. And you brought this up earlier, and it can be a really circuitous route that we take. It's the adventure. What happens when we get to our goal? We immediately start thinking about what are we going to do next?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's crazy. Vast majority of my audience is women. And women have a problem saying no. How do we go to the place where we, whether a woman or a man, where we don't feel guilty or unkind when we say no? And I think that ties into the whole thing about priorities that you have, which is you've got to set priorities because, you know, you got to take the kids to soccer at 5 o'clock and you got to get these other things done beforehand. But especially to those of us that are of the female persuasion, I think we're just raised like, of course, you're going to do it. And then everything else can suffer as a result. Do you have any advice for us on that?
You know, hopefully it comes through right. But if you say yes all the time, you're setting everybody up for failure because you're not going to accomplish that all. And what you're going to do is you're going to create worse environments. Because say I say, oh yes, I'll cook that meal for the team, and yes, I'll go pick up all the kids after school, and yes, I will be on these 3 Zoom calls, and yes, I will be at church for the event tonight, and yes, I will go to the airport to pick you up, and yes, and then you can only do one of them because they're all at the same time. So what have you just done, right? You're setting no because you have to put priorities of which priorities. And yes, I absolutely would love to do this, but unfortunately I can't fit in today. But if we can reschedule this or put this on, next week, I would really love to do this because this is important to me, right? And it's just setting a frame for what really is possible. And the part of saying no, it does sound hard, but you're also really almost being selfish by saying yes because you're really keeping someone who can do it from being able to do it. And then you're almost setting yourself up and the other person up for failure because no one's going to be able to commit to all of them.
So, how do we get to the place where we're able to discern about what's really a priority and not feeling guilty about saying no? Because every woman I know has felt this probably for the vast majority of their lives.
What is the priority? I think that's the first question, right? Because if it's, there's a certain point, and it's and understanding that there's seasons of priorities too, right? Like an example, so COVID, right? So COVID happened. My wife and I had talks before, like something like a COVID had happened, that if there was ever the need, right, that when something happened, that if it was, I would go all business and she would go all family. And so when that happened, right, there was a lot of energy because, there was talk that like, everybody's going to be out. There was no one going to be living in buildings. It was just like craziest talk, right? So I went all business and she went all focused on the family for that season, for those couple months until things just figured their way out, right? It's setting up what's the priority, not only on yourself, but in your family, right? And so if your priority is that you're going to be present for all your kids' things, even though you have a business, right, then you have to make sure that you're saying yes to the stuff that serves the first order of priority, right? And so what are the orders of priority? Write them down, right? And it might change, right? It might be, okay, now we're in summer, so you don't have to school, you don't have to take your kids to school, right? So maybe it's that you can change your priorities up. So in each season it changes. But there has to be a certain level of what the priorities are. You can't say, yes, I'm going to be on this business meeting at the same time you're supposed to be picking your kids up from school, right? It's like you have to make sure that there's a layer of priority. And you can feel bad for it until you understand that it's serving everyone better, right? You can say, yes, I would love to do that, but I can't do that today. I can do that next week. And you can find layers in your schedule and really using your calendar to your advantage, where you say, in the morning I work out, and this is just frame of reference. In the morning I work out. From 8 to 10 I do family stuff. From 10 to 2 I do business stuff, and from 2 to 8 o'clock I do family stuff. And maybe you can do business stuff after if you want to. But if you set that in, then you start working in what works, and you start adapting your life to your schedule instead of trying to have your life adapt to everybody else's schedule.
Which I think is a missing link for most of us who are moms and wives and work and all of that. Jess, you've mentioned a couple of times, Jason, about writing it down. What's the magic about writing it down?
So to-do lists are this never ending thing where you constantly can just have a to-do list in your head, but it's just like this never ending list, right? So if you usually put down the 5 things you need to do today, it's a very simple process. Did I do those 5 things? Because then everything else really falls into place. And it could be work and family, right? Like today I need to, go coach sports. I need to make this sales call back to a broker that's supposed to be bringing us a lead. I have to underwrite a project, right? Because these are things that are serving everything, right? These are things that are going to serve pushing my business forward. Because on top of that, I could fill in 100 different things that don't matter, right? And not get those 5 things done. Right. I could say, oh, today I need to go pick up a pair of sneakers, or I need to go get stamps, like all these things that were like, oh, I need to, buy something on Amazon. Like I could do 100 things before the important things, but you put down on paper, you can put up top the 5 things you want to do. And if you get those done, then go mess around. But those 5 things are going to make your life better. And we usually have all that stuff in our head. So we usually just go from easiest to hardest. And the hardest stuff is the stuff that's going to carry your life forward. The easiest stuff is go on Amazon, go to the post office, run down to whatever and pick something up, like all these filler things. And then we feel like we're accomplishing stuff because we're busy, right? We're busy in the moment, but we're really not getting anything good done because it's not leading us to success the next day. So each day, if you have three, it could be 3 or 5 things, because past that, you're typically not getting the lion's share of everything done. And that's usually the Tony Robbins, people overestimate what they can do in a week, underestimate they can do in a year or 5 years, right? It's the same context for your life. You want to do 100 things in a day, but really there's only 3 or 5 things that you get done. And if you do that repeatedly, right, it's the level of compounding, right? If you improve 1% a day, people are like, that's not a lot. But if you do that over the course of a year, it's not 365% of improvement, because you've improved 1% compounded each day. It's over 3,000% of improvement. So if you just do one thing better each day, 1% better each day, it's light years away from where you were just by that small change. But it's repetition of just doing those things and putting in patterns, because then it gets you out of the way of just doing a bunch of busyness. Because I've spent years of just being busy, feeling like you're getting stuff done, but you're really not getting stuff done. You just did a bunch of things, but those things weren't things that were fruitful to you, your business, your life. And when you start making the priorities the first up, I mean, sometimes you could be done by 11 a.m. Great. Now the rest of the day, go do other stuff that you had on your plate, right? Go fill out, do whatever. But if you get those 3 or 5 things and do them right away, just get them off the board, you feel accomplished. And then the next day you build on it, you build on it. And then lo and behold, you look back and say, whoa, what happened?
Mm-hmm. Do you make your list the night before, or do you make it the morning of?
It's a combination. It's a combination. I will do a couple tricks where I will send out emails on reminder, because sometimes it will be something that I need to do a week from today, right, on a certain day. And I will set emails to myself on a set time, and I will have those scheduled to come into me. And then I'll have a list next to me at the desk, of which I will come in, and at many times, if I'll recap, or at the end of the night, I'll come in with that list the first day and just get those on the paper and say, these are important for today. And I'll go through my checklist. And you'll see that, you're an entrepreneur. So many times you have a million ideas all the time, ideas, 100 times over. And then, so every night you may have 100 ideas, and the next day you come to it and you're like, okay, those weren't the things I need to do. I need to do 3 of these, right? And so it almost allows you to get everything out at the end and then prioritize the next day. And then you keep carrying forward.
I get what I call divine downloads early in the morning. As I'm sort of waking up, but I'm not out of bed yet, I have gotten whole business plans downloaded.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I'll go, okay, yeah. And then I'll take a small step, I'll investigate it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to end up doing that thing, but it's going to lead me to something else that I'm being led to do. And I tell people that all the time. It's similar to when you're researching something online and you're at a website, then you go to another website, and then you're led to another website. Before long, you're at the 7th website, and you think, how the heck did I even get here? But it's the information that you need. We're led. I have found that we're led to the next step and the next step and the next step. And all we have to do is take action. And that's what's the fun of it, is who knows? It's an adventure. Let's see where it goes. And you talk about discipline and structure, and those obviously are 2 facets of what you teach with the discipline and structure. Pick 3 to 5 things and do that. Would you share those compounded numbers again? You do
Sure.
something once a day. Tell us that
Yeah.
again. I had whole body chills on that.
Yeah. Well, we always want these big, massive transformations, right? We want, today I go and I start a business, and tomorrow I'm a millionaire, right? Or today, I'm set on finding that perfect person in my life, and tomorrow I'm married, right? We always want these things. And what we forget about is that you have to become the person that shows up as that person into the future. And when you can set in certain things, and it can be small things, right? Okay, like, what could I do right now that could be beneficial in my life? Okay, stop drinking late at night, right? Get up at a set time each day. Make 2 sales calls each day, right? Where before you were doing, like, all these things don't sound like they're moving the needle. But if you do that every single day, right? every single day. And each day, right, you're getting up early. You're starting to learn how to get up. Maybe you get a glass of water an hour. You start to get up and you have your shoes by your bed because you want to go running, or you make these sales calls. You know how to start to call better. Each day, you just start to practically get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. It starts to build in this way where that 1% each day, because if you had $1 and tomorrow you get 10% more, tomorrow you'll have $1.10. Well, the next day, if you get 10% more, you don't get another 10 cents, you get 11 cents, right? So it's $1.21. And if you compound it by another 10 cents, now it's $1.32. Well, the same thing happens in our life where each 1% you get better over the course of 365 days. Every day you're getting 1% better. By the end of it, you've gone from 1% the first day. It's a total, it's over 3,000% improvement over the course of a year.
That's profound, Jason. That I've never heard it put that way before, especially with life. I mean, I've heard, you exercise every day, and then over a year, that's going to make a difference and things like that. But I've never heard it put so succinctly as you just did. So thank you for sharing that.
Working out is that thing, where you can really see the pitfalls is that New Year's resolutions, right?
Yeah.
92% of New Year's resolutions fail. It's because you've spent 365 days being a train wreck to your life. And then all of a sudden, like, say you haven't worked out like all year and you've been eating horrible. And then on January 1st, somehow you're magically going to just walk into a gym and work out for 4 hours a day. And say you magically do that. And then the next day you're so sore you can't get out of bed. And then like in 7 days, maybe you go back and then you just slowly fall off. Right. But we don't never have to wait for the New Year's resolution. Yeah, I have this mailbox theory where I did this with my aunt. My aunt was just trying to get into a workout rhythm in this part, and she wanted to start doing stuff, and she just was out of shape in her own context, right? And I said, today just walk to the first mailbox. It sounds like okay, but just gets you going, right? And then the next day walk to the next mailbox, and then the next day just walk to the next mailbox. And what it did is it wasn't overwhelming. It was something that you can get up and you feel accomplished. You feel like part. Lo and behold, she gets up to a half mile. Then you get up to a part. Now she's walking around the block. It's a full mile, right? And lo and behold, just by doing that, you're not so focused on today did I lose weight? Today do I feel slimmer, right? You're focused on accomplishing that next series of the path. And lo and behold, she started to feel better about herself, regardless of the weight. You just felt like you had more energy, you had more vibrancy, right? Then she started to lose a little bit of weight, right? And then you just started feeling that it was easier to go to the next one because you just started working one mailbox at a time. And you can treat that in anything. You can treat that in just anything at all, right? You can treat that in family, in business, in life, right? You can do that in all different patterns. But what we usually want is, I haven't worked out in a year, but I'm going to run a marathon today. That's what we usually think. And it's like, then you get out and you get to the first mailbox, like, oh, I'm never doing this again. But when you start to do that, it's just bite-sized chunks, right? It's like, how do you eat an elephant kind of theory. And that gives you just energy.
And you're getting results pretty early on because they're things that are achievable. Yeah.
It's it's when you constantly set up expectations of just setting yourself up for failure, you get discouraged. And we all want the ultimate, we want the Instagram effect. We want to be in the perfect shape. We want to have whatever you want to have. We want to see that right away. But when you do that, then the first thing you feel constantly lacking and as less. But when you set up a thing for something that it's not so easy to get off the gate, but in saying you start building wins and the wins start stacking. And when you, there's this guy in Frisella, he talked about, winning the day, right? And you may not win every day, but like, maybe the first month you set up a couple of things you want to do, and maybe you win 20 out of 30 days. And you're like, okay, the other 10 days you lost. Well, if the next month, maybe you win 22, right? And the next month, it's never going to be you win every day, right? Today, maybe the water heater broke and, you got someone ran in the back of your car and just blew up your whole day, right? So, okay, you lost that day. It's okay. Well, let's get up and win the next day, right? And when you just set up these things and you start building wins on top of each other, what happens? You get more wins. But if every day is just a loss because today I'm not a millionaire, and then tomorrow I'm not a millionaire, and then the next day I'm not a millionaire, then every day I've just lost. I've lost. But if the context of you get out of the way of just the goal that's out of your control and get back to it, well, did I make 5 sales calls today? Yes, check. Next day, did I make 5 sales calls? Yes, check. Not that I close the deal, but I make 5. And because you can control the action, you can't control the result. But many times we want the result to set up how we feel, when it's really the action that dictates everything that we get from the result.
Yeah. With that, if you had to recommend one small daily action that somebody took, it sounds to me like you're saying write down your priorities, 3 to 5 priorities. Would that be your number one thing you would recommend to people?
I also like controllables, right? And so I would make it simple in the morning because many times, days feel out of control because you start out of control. And so maybe, you wake up late and then, you're late, you're flustered, you run downstairs, you eat something bad, you go up, you maybe shower, you forget to shower, you throw your shoes on, you're rushing, maybe you grab a coffee, you don't know what you do, you get in the car, you're stuck in traffic. And here you are, you're so mad because you're just rushed, you're late for work, you run in, the entire day is just a fire. And then you get in traffic on the way home, you get home and you're like, oh, this was a horrible day. And you get a beer and you watch Netflix and then you do the next thing the same day and the same day and the same day. And then you're like, oh, what am I doing? Right. But I like to just get up and have in the morning. Like I get up at a set time, have a glass of water. Maybe I'll meditate or pray, I'll work out. And within 45 minutes, I've just set a control pattern. And so now out of the gate, it's like what is the colonel or the general who says like make your bed is the first one of the day.
Yeah.
It's very similar
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
Make wins in the morning because you can't control what's going to happen the rest of the day. But what you've done is set controls and set some pattern of feeling accomplished. So when you get into the rest of the day, maybe it'll go good, but you'll be more prepared, you won't be level headed. But when you start in chaos, everything feels chaotic for the rest of the day.
Mhm. Well, and I think humans thrive on routine. Certainly babies
Absolutely.
do, and
Yeah.
little children do. And I think adults do too. A friend of mine's mom passed, and she and her mom and her dad, they were in their late 80s. And the dad, yeah, God, they've been married for forever. And it was the first time he'd ever lived alone,
Oh, wow.
my friend's dad. And she said the thing that he was in World War II, and he said, I gotta get back in my routine
Yeah.
because that makes me feel like I'm accomplishing things. It makes me calm, what you were saying. And I think routine is something that we as humans, just whether we recognize it or not, it's something we all do. Even if you've got a chaotic life, your routine is you go to work, you drive
Hmm.
to work, you drive
Gives you purpose.
home, all of those things. But change your routine to be something that not only is going to benefit you, but add something that's enjoyable in there in the mornings. I think you bring up a really good point.
Yeah, you get stuck in bad routines where, sometimes you don't know how to get out of a rut, but you think about it like you are in such a routine, you will get up, you will, first, when you take a shower, you'll wash your hair first. When you get in a car to drive somewhere, you're going to drive the same way first. And like, if you're saying, I don't like what I'm doing, then try to just do things differently. Brush your teeth, like your right hand and brush your teeth with your left hand. And it would just change your mind for a minute and to give you a different context and things. Take the opposite way to go to the grocery store, right? When you first go in, like you can think of 100 ways to just change up the little things. So it's not like, because usually people will be like, okay, I wake up, right, and then I'll go have a cigarette and drink a coffee, right, and so those are bad routines, but that's been your routine. So you have to change it around to a part where you're still filling that gap. Because what usually happens with habits is people think I'm just going to break a habit, but you don't get rid of a habit, you replace a habit. So if you say I'm not going to smoke anymore, well, if you smoke, at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner, well, now there's say 45 minutes throughout that day where now you can. It's not like that time you just sit there and void, right? There has to be a fill in. Okay, so what are you going to do in each of that 15 minutes, right? Do you read a book now? Do you have a cup of tea? Like, do you go walk around the block? Like, what do you do in those 15 minutes? And so if you want to replace a habit that's not serving you, you have to figure out what's going to be that replacement. Because if you don't have that replacement, then the simple thing will be like, well, I don't know what to do now, so I'll just smoke a cigarette again.
Yeah, good point. Back to the money issue. Because all of us have, unless we're trust fund babies, which I'm not, it doesn't sound like you are either. All of us have been there where we're thinking, oh my God, where's my next $100 coming from? How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to get out of this financial bind? Is there a mindset shift that anybody can do today that's going to transform their energy around money, what they're going to realize with money? Is there something simple? Is there one small step that everybody can do that you would recommend and it would have an effect on their monetary life?
Give two. The first is more just a check the box, If you don't know what you're spending, then you don't know what you need to make. So simply that, if you don't know what your costs are each month, then you can never know if you have money or broke, right? Because at every month you just don't know, like, oh, well, this month I am negative $300 again. I have no idea why, right? But if you don't know what you spend in your car, your cable, and this part, and like you can go and probably half the time we're so out of control, you have 10 subscriptions you're paying for, you don't even know it, right? So if you don't know what your costs are, then you really don't know what your control parameters are.
Especially on your phone, all those
100%.
apps on
100%.
the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'd be the first. And like, so if you can get back and say each month we spend, and it's hard, right? When you are having trouble with money, the hardest thing is actually look at it, right? I remember when, my parents were having trouble with bills, like my mom would like just not open the mail as if it would just like, that would solve the problem. Right. And I just remember it. It's like, it's hard. And like, you have to face it, because when you face it again, you can solve a problem. If you don't know what the problem is to solve, then you can't solve a problem. Right. And then on the other side is that there has never been a time that you can make more money. You can have a full-time job and literally go, do DoorDash after the part, or go put something online and sell something. There's never been more time to go out there and find more opportunities to just make money doing rent. You could sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace. I mean, like there's a million different ways that if you are open to the scenario of just figuring it out, you will find a way to do that. But again, like you don't want to spend all this time making all this extra money if you can just say, well, I didn't realize it, but we're spending all this money on this thing and this thing and this thing. You just stop and now you have money again, right? So first off, know what you're spending. And then if that's your lifestyle, okay, either you have to change your lifestyle or you have to set up the part of making more money. I find even with apartment buildings, like you can, at many times you want to increase revenue and you want to control expenses. But at a certain point, your expenses will go up when you're increasing revenue, because you're having to do more things, more marketing, right? More payroll, more staff, right? So you can't basically cut your expenses and increase your revenue at the same time. You have to figure out, right? It's like me, I'm trying to build muscle and lose weight at the same time. Like that doesn't happen, right? You're either building muscle or you're losing weight, right? And so it's the same thing with your money part. You have to figure out what's the first piece needs, figure out your costs. And then, okay, now you know your costs, figure out how to make more money.
Yeah. And write it down.
Write it down.
Dave Ramsey, who's in your neck of the woods, the financial peace guy, in 1995, when I moved to Nashville, I took his financial peace class, my husband and I did, from him before he went up on the satellite. And this is his whole MO. And he talks about, you write it down, you know what's happening, you budget. I got this much to go out to dinner. I got this much. I still do that after all these years. Yeah. And he's built this huge empire, teaching people how to do that. For those of you that are listening, Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace, he's got a show, and go get his book. I mean, it's really just, and he talks about it. And I remember he did way back when we were taking the class from him, and he said it's what our grandparents and our great grandparents did. They had envelopes, and they would put cash in the envelopes, and this was the grocery money, and this was the church money, and this was the whatever money. And he's amazing how many people he's helped. And you're saying the same thing about that. What's the Bottle John effect?
Oh, so that's a fun story I haven't talked about in a bit. So I was in New York City, right? And I was working at this outside bar, and it was just this weird spot that I ended up happened at. I was in Germany. I'd met a kid. When I got back, he said, you should come to this bar and work at this bar. It was just happened to be at this random bar. And this bar, it was just so weird that it was on a barge, and they couldn't even get tap beer out there. So they would just have bottled beers. And it was like just this like little like bar that just like random people could find, because it was like on the west side of Manhattan. It was just in this really weird spot. There was like no internet. Like it was just like weird. And lo and behold, I started working there. And then, at the end of the night, it was like this guy, his name was Captain Krevy. He had passed away, but he was the owner of the place. And so he would just have all these random people just come help. It would just be like friends. It was just like this very mishap place. And at the end of the night, it was always chaos, because sometimes you would end at 2 a.m. Sometimes it would be 5 a.m. and there'd be nobody to clean it up. And so the next day, it was always this hustle to try to get it cleaned up, because no one would pick up the bottles, because he could have nobody who would just repeatedly come back. It was just like very out of place bar with just like this makeshift staff. Well, one night this guy comes out and he's like, hey, can I just pick up the bottles and just go recycle them? And the guy, John, was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay, no problem. Just expecting him to be like everybody else, and just, next day doesn't show up again. Well, lo and behold, he just shows up again the next day. And then, the next week, and he just starts picking up the bottles and just taking it out and just like solving that piece of just like repetition, right? Well, this little bar that we were at, turns out it goes from this spot where nobody knows where it is, right, to becoming the biggest outdoor bar in New York City,
Oh my goodness.
and the biggest. And at one point, just for context, we served the most Corona bottle beer in the world for 2 summers in a row. And that was only the course of 3 months because we were only open for 3 months. So the most bottles in the world of just Corona beer. We would have all the reps. It was nuts. But lo and behold, who was there picking up all the bottles? Bottle John. So he went from just picking up a couple bottles, and now all of a sudden he's having a team. He's having all these people out there helping him. End of the night, he's taking off 800 cases of just bottles, just off the pier and growing. And the through line was, well, John, he was a homeless guy, and he was just looking for something to just give him some value in his life. So he went from this part where, I ended up a couple years later, I left that bar. One night I'm in the subway, and I'm just, if you're ever in the subway in New York City and it's August, it's just miserable. It's just hot, just horrible, right? So I'm sitting there just, waiting for the subway train, and this really well-dressed guy walks by me, and I'm just like, just for whatever reason, just caught my eye, right? And it turns out it was Bottle John. And had a moment with him. And, John had gotten himself off to the street, had found himself to be able to get himself housing in up in Harlem. And he now had his family living with him, and his whole life had transformed because he had put in the energy to say that, woe is me, I'm homeless, to go out there to do something, to just give himself purpose without any of the payoff. When he started doing this, he had no idea that this would become this kind of bar. He just said, I was going to do something, and then just kept doing it. And lo and behold, it started to create him outcome, give him a life, give him purpose, give him progress. And not only did he do it here, but he started to take this and do it at other places too, right? Because he solved the problem that no one knew it was a problem, right? But he just solved the problem and did something that nobody else wanted to do because nobody else was showing up. And what happened? His life completely transformed because he showed up.
Did he recycle those bottles and get paid for
He
all of
did.
them?
Yeah. He
So that gave him a source
started
of
getting a revenue
revenue as
stream from
well.
that part. And then at some
800 cases of bottles. Good heavens. Wonder what that's worth.
it was a very wild, interesting time, but and we went, I saw that place. At one point, I think the revenue was up like 25x. It was just a very crazy moment to watch this little place that nobody could find. I would explain to my friends where I work, and they were like, I don't even know how to get there. It was like behind this place that was Basketball City, and where the police put their horses. And that's how you would get to it. And all of a sudden in 1 year, they moved it up 3 blocks because the whole barge moved up 3 blocks, and they knocked down the whole area over there to redo the whole park. And the next day, the business just went to the moon. It was in all the magazines. It was just nuts. And we saw this whole transformation. It was a whole different time in my life, but it was very interesting to watch it.
So the moral of the story is you're led to do things. Take action.
Take action. You can't predict where it's going to go.
Whether you're a Bottle John or whether you're
energy out there, right?
Bar owner.
You will find that if you keep putting good energy out there and you keep showing up, and the simple thing is that, you say you're going to do something, do it. Because there's a million people who will say they're going to do something that don't do anything. And there was a million people who had that opportunity that just didn't show up the next day and didn't think it was beneath them or not right for them. And they just show up to do something of value, and people will see that and will grow. Usually what happens many times is that, someone wants to be a manager, right? But they won't do good in this park. Say, I just should be a manager, right? But you forget, the things you're doing today are what is going to represent you when you get to that spot. It's like being in sports, right? You do practice, right, to get in to do well in the game, but you don't, not do well in practice and then expect to do good in the game. You have to go and prove yourself in practice. So when you're ready into the game, you're ready for the game. It's like the same thing with life. When the opportunity comes, then you'll be ready, right? You ready yourself. So when that opportunity comes, you realize the opportunity.
Right. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Ooh, that's a good question. Why do we incarnate? I would say life gives us a million different angles that we can look at, right? And it gives us a million different ways that could be our life, right? And it gives us that opportunity to see life again and again in different ways that really we never witnessed before.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here to create. You're extraordinary, sir. How fun to get to talk to you and hear about your life and how you've been led and how you follow where you're being continuing to be led and all of that. Thanks everybody.